Eric, the
hmm
book is Rebranding the Church, Restoring the Image of God's People in the World. Comes out
hmm
next week. Did you say
Yeah.
next Wednesday?
Yes.
Next
Mhm.
Wednesday. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to hit you with questions about the book. I've already had kind of I don't know, a pre-copy and got the privilege of reading it, and it's been phenomenal. Uh, Starting right at the beginning, like in the title, when you use the word rebranding, what do you mean, and what do you not mean?
Yeah. So first off, thanks for you guys having me on here. I never uh, take it lightly when someone asks me to be on their platform to share ideas to promote the kingdom. So, Riley, thank y'all for having me on here.
Absolutely.
So yeah, rebranding the church is not really about redefining the church, but more about representing the church from a biblical and core standpoint that God wants us to be in relation to being salt and light in the world. Real simply like that. And so we have an image problem because of tribalism. We have an image problem because of extremism. We have an image problem because of backbiting and fighting over tribal and footnote ideologies online that are non-essential. That is so saturated with that there's a lack of trust. When the word church comes up, that's why the first step is, what do you think of when you hear the word church? Are there pleasantries that come up, or is it kind of like an assessment? I remember I was at a corner store across the street. Those are small little stores in Philly. Some people park on bodegas, wherever you're from in the States. But and I went there years ago and I had on a big t-shirt, some baggy pants, and some Timberland boots, butter Tims. And when I went in there, somebody said, "Hey, Pastor, how you doing?" Everybody looked at me like, "That's a pastor." And I'm not talking about dress, but it's just that they have an expectation sometimes of a pastor. And many times I don't want people to even know I'm a pastor until they know me. So like if people ask, "What do you do for a living?" I'll say, "I'm a public speaker, and an author." "What kind of books do you write?" So they keep probing and probing and probing. I'll say, "Oh, okay, I'm a pastor." So, but yeah, so the book is really about us having a more stable commitment as believers to give a biblical portrait of who God has called us to be so that we can have the credibility to share Jesus with anyone.
What is there a single most damaging kind of brand you think that the church has projected in this generation?
Disunity.
Disunity. Okay.
Yeah, I think tribalism. I think you get. We don't have to talk about all the stuff going on now, but the political tribalism is just crazy. I think that's just. I just think it's caused more damage than we'll ever know,
Hmm.
and so I think that's a major issue now because you got you in America, right? When you look at the West in general, Christianity, denominationalism is not really looked at anymore. It's more tribalism now and ethnic divisions. And so I think that there has to be a more concerted effort to to promote the doctrine of unity, not uniformity or acting like unity is not like acting like nothing's wrong. Unity is the ability, despite the wrong that's going on, to know who can help work through and solve what is a breach between brothers and sisters in Christ.
Hmm.
And so for me, I feel like from a social media standpoint, like on YouTube and Twitch, I'm not on Twitch much, but at all. I'm on mostly Instagram, YouTube, and Threads sometime, and on TikTok. And one of the things that you're going to get is you're going to get a lot of false teaching that is not representative of Christianity.
Hmm.
Whether it's hyper charismatics, not the being charismatic is wrong. I'm talking about hyper charismania. Whether it's the Seven Mountains movement, whether it's grave soaking, whether it's some deliverance service or some offering, it's like Christians are seen as in particularly among Gen Z and millennial here as hyper spiritual, disconnected, money hungry people who aren't really in their faith for what the faith was created for. And so now we're dealing with, what does it look like for us to track our way back to having a healthy relationship with our faith so that we can have a healthy witness to bring people to Christ and help them to grow spiritually.
Do you think this moment right now, if you're willing to talk about it, do you think this Charlie Kirk thing going on is that displaying some of this tribalism?
Yeah. Yeah, it is because you have the quote unquote, it's not really monolithic, right? So the conservatives aren't monolithic and the liberals aren't monolithic. However, what you seem to hear are the more extreme sides of both being expressed when it comes to, but the ones who have the main voice with this are the conservative, right wing conservatives on it, which it's different components of it that's going on with it that's confusing to people.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's soteriologically confusing for people. I think it's ethically confusing for people. And I think that people are like, we don't even know what Christianity is anymore. We don't even know, like, does it belong to Christ? Does it belong to a political party? Does it belong to an ethnicity? And so we have to do the hard work of kind of rescuing it from the stereotypes that we as human beings have created for it.
So I'm obviously coming from a Canadian context, but actually my family and I we're moving to Florida. My wife's moving tomorrow, and I'm
Oh,
following in a week. She's from New York, and most of our family's migrated to Florida now. So
wow.
I'm gonna come into that context, and hopefully not offend too many people, but it's a bit of a strange organism for me coming from here, and I'm watching this Charlie Kirk thing play out too, and just as they call him a martyr and stuff, and that might be accurate and whatnot, but it's weird for me to look at it and see this like the political and the Christian just seem like wrapped up, or maybe the nationalism and the just wrapped up into one thing.
Yeah,
Uh, and even I'm reading Eusebius last night, reading about like all these martyrs he's describing, and like it's a very clear, at least from my perspective, this many thousands of years later, I'm looking at it and it's like they're dying just for Jesus, and maybe there's more to it that I'm not seeing more
yeah.
than
That
that,
that's
but
that's
it
the
looks
key. What you
very.
just said. That's the key. What you just said.
What's
They're
that?
dying just for Jesus.
Yeah, well, that's what it looks like from my perspective now, right? Like it almost feels like
Absolutely.
a pure like. And then I looked at this Kirk thing, and again, I'm so disconnected that I don't really, my opinion doesn't really matter. But it looks convoluted. Like I'm like, this seems so tied into all these national political pieces. It
Yeah.
just looks a little different.
Yeah. I think the question is when you call someone on the money, I'm talking in general, are they a dissonant or you understand what I'm saying? Like, are they or are they something else? And I think that when we talk about martyrdom is a very strong word
Hmm.
for the faith because Jesus is very clear on martyrdom in the Beatitudes. He's very clear on it in the latter part of John 15 and things like that. When you're persecuted for righteousness' sake, the question is always, is what a martyr for Christianity is whether or not what you're being killed for is connected to righteousness. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. I'll have to think about that more. How do you ground the idea, Eric, of rebranding in Scripture? Like, are there
Mhm.
biblical examples that show the church kind of, I don't know, recalibrating its witness in new contexts, new cultural contexts?
Yeah. So the church, Jesus was coming to build his church, and rescue it, right? Uh, and so Israel was supposed to be the church, and they were supposed to be missionaries. They were supposed to be they're the original. Like God has always been moving towards rescuing humanity back to Himself cross ethnically, always. And so when we talk about this idea of really the church is a remnant of the people of God in the New Testament that grew from a remnant. Jesus had 3, 12, 70, 120, and 500. Then on the day of Pentecost, 10,000 people, if you count women and children. And so, so when you look at the church, um, it's really God, when he created the church, was rebranding what the people of God was supposed to be like. And so that was the most important thing for that particular time because he said, you will be my witnesses, right? So you will be firsthand those who are my heralds. Like, I'm in the Marvel. You like Galactus is coming, Silver Surfer goes out and lets the planet know the destroyer planets are coming. Well, we're
Yeah.
Jesus' heralds, right? Well, we go out into the world and we herald the fact that the emperor is going to return. And so you can get on his side early. And so with looking at the whole idea of rebranding church, the church was so, you could tell it was whenever something's being rebranded, those who have institutionalized false norms always feel threatened
Mm.
when God is reshaping what he's doing. And so what you see in the New Testament is you see Pharisees and Sadducees and all of the people, they were, even when he finished the sermon on, they said, what is this, a new teaching with authority? He's like, what is this? Like, and Jesus is saying, yeah, upon this rock I'm gonna build my ecclesia, and the gates of Gehenna will not. And so he said, I am localizing the people of God in the ecclesia, not in Israel, not in Gentiles, but in the ecclesia. So it's going to be both Jew and Gentile as one people of God. That was always supposed to be that way. From Genesis, that's what God said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. They were supposed to help one another flourish. They're supposed to help, the world be multifaceted art of different people of different types, globally flourishing on the planet. And so now God sent Christ to restore that vision, but he's restoring it through the church. The problem is the church isn't handling the product well. We're wondering what the product is. Is it our political party? Is our product purpose? Like in America, so many people talking about your purpose in your life, and God wants to put you in your purpose, and so we've changed the goalpost, and we've changed what is the center of the Christian faith, and now we have to. I feel like rebranding the church, one of the things is getting back to some of those things. So it's a lot of things that we can rebrand, but I chose some systemic things
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like was helpful. So one of the things that I talk about is rebranding church leadership. How is leadership perceived? And how do you choose proper leadership? So leaders, how do you functionally get under God's covering in the way you lead? But then believers, how do you choose healthy leadership to be under when you're choosing a local ecclesia? Discipleship. I don't hear that word anymore. I don't hear that being a focus of churches anymore. We've in this latter age of church, we have an event-based culture
Mm-hmm.
with church versus an incarnational. I'm sorry. And so we don't have an incarnational mechanism of basically saying it's both. Where is the communal? It's like Darrell Guda talks about being a community of communities in his book Missional Church, and helping the church. Like, where is that communal, incarnational, die to self, build my life around Jesus kind of stuff happening anymore when it comes to discipleship? When I'm consumed with being conformed to His image, and that whole idea of discipleship, then going into preaching and teaching, rebranding preaching and teaching. What's the main thing of preaching and teaching? Centering on that. And then I talk about purpose and dreaming. I talked about that. Then rebranding a relationship with men, particularly in my community. The church has a really struggled relationship with men. And so what we want to do is talk about ways where we make the church more accessible to men,
Mm-hmm.
because I think the church is very accessible to women. I'm not dogging women. I just think that we have to have a plan, because men you have to go get, women you can invite. It's two different things.
That's good.
And so I think that's very important. Then evangelism and mission. I don't hear about evangelism and mission anymore. Like 20 years ago when I was planting this church, it was like a wave. I know you had the emerging and emergent, and you had all the things, and planting a church is the most successful way of doing evangelism. I don't hear of anybody doing. I don't hear about any evangelism anymore. I hear a little bit about apologetics, but it's more about rescuing people from leaving the faith,
Hmm.
versus, it's kind of trying to prevent deconstruction right now more so than it is, man, where's the lost people? Let me go get them type thing. And mission, I don't hear about. I can't remember the last time I've heard somebody tell me they felt a call to foreign mission field. I just haven't.
Yep.
I haven't heard it in a long time. So that, also rebranding church membership and community. And so, because everybody thinks that we can do our faith alone, and I'm like, no, you can't. When you get saved, that's why the whole idea of, let's get a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. When you personalize your relationship with God the Father through Christ as only being restored to Him, you minimize the gospel, because we're saved to be in a relationship with God and His people, not
Hmm.
just God. And so I think we've lost that, and we have an a la carte faith now where people are like, I'll take a little bit of this. So it's a buffet faith. I don't, community, I'll just do Bible study and stuff at home, play my worship music. Do I want to serve? I'll give something to some. So it's like making core things optional. And so me going
Hmm.
back to that. Then last but not least, um, rebranding Jesus. Just, you know, I've dealt with a lot of mystery cults, Hebrew Israelites, Nation of Islam, Kemetic spirituality. And so but then you have all of the new age people that want to borrow Jesus for an example for what the best human is like. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't get to parse Jesus out and again have him a la carte. He's not, you can't go into system settings in Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, this is, leave all that other stuff out, like dying to self and coming to you who are weary. I want you to be my example. And so now we're saying, no, 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 let's rebrand Jesus. He gets to be the boss of your life. You don't get to
Yeah.
be his instruction. You don't give him a syllabus. He gives you one. So yeah.
Is this a bold book in that, like, just hearing you talk about it, like, it's a real friendly, inviting cover, but hearing you
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, it's like, okay, this is going to unsettle. In order for this to happen, the Pharisees, the scribes, what it like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah.
going to unsettle I don't know, foundation or whatever, the place that some people are living and happy to stay there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah, because I think that, because what I want to do is I give kind of an overarching theological construct, but I also give very practical mechanisms to lock into that. The challenge is not just philosophical, it's practical, and
Okay.
hopefully can lead to transformation.
Are there cultural factors that you think have most shaped the church's negative reputation today,
I think it, I think
or a few that really stand out?
Yeah, I think we mentioned some. Hold on, let me tell myself some mine. Comes in 4 minutes. Please get it for me. Okay, so what contribute? I think there's a lot of stuff in recent years
Okay.
that has contributed. I think for now, I'm speaking of United States. I don't know what
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
in overseas, but I do know
We're not
that.
overseas though. You know that, right?
No, I know that. I'm saying no, no, no.
I'm
I know
just
you're
kidding.
in Canada, but I'm
Yeah,
saying I'm
yeah.
not talking about overseas. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, but I do see that Africa has some similar issues in certain
Okay.
parts of different countries, like South Africa and different ones. Because I was there this year.
Okay.
But I think the race issue was one of the first things of years ago, like 2013 with the death of Trayvon Martin. I think people began really, they were already the right and the left already existed, but it wasn't what it is now.
Okay.
Uh, I think that the growth of and the pushing on of liberal ideologies and where you stood with it. I mean, are you going to be hard on LGBTQ stuff, or are you going to be, what they call affirming, or are you going to say, I love you, but this is my disagreement with you?
Hmm.
And then you got the whole idea of, you know, the new Make the America Great thing kind of situation, MAGA, where and then just the way that leadership has carried itself and opened up doors for people to act in a particular way. And then you had I mean, I have never seen a presidential campaign as um polarizing as this last one,
Hmm.
since I've been alive. And so I just believe that there is a quandrum of things, but I also think that you have a part of the church that's trying to be cool, they're trying to be exceptional, acceptable, and so they've taken seeker sensitive to another level, and which is almost like not seeker sensitive, but stripping down some of the core things that make church church.
Yeah.
I think you got the spiritual warfare and deliverance movement. I think you have the Seven Mountains movement, Word of Faith, and health, wealth, prosperity movement. And I just believe that has done so much damage on social media to the church. I just think it's done damage globally to the church. And so now our image, people don't know what we're like a Frankenstein of
Yeah.
things. We're either highly politicized or highly spiritual or whoremongering, immoral shipwrecks. So
Is this a difference? Like, the early church was somewhat misrepresented in that people were looking in and
that's
being like,
right.
oh, okay,
That's right.
you're
That's right.
incest, you're cannibals, you're whatever. They were being
Yeah,
the things they're doing misinterpreted.
absolutely.
But is it kind of the reverse right now where we're not so much just being misinterpreted, we are misrepresenting?
Yeah, that's why Peter says in chapter 4, he says, listen, don't get persecuted for dumb stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? He's like, get persecuted for stuff that for righteousness, not for unrighteousness. And so they should revile you for you having a commitment to Jesus, not looking like him or
Hmm.
being the furthest thing from him, right?
So in that way, like to some degree, we're being complicit with our
Yeah,
own misrepresentation of the world.
yeah. Because I don't think that we've earned the right to be heard. We lost it.
Okay. Well, maybe these are all kind of circling maybe the same kind of ideas, but where do you see the biggest gap between the way the church perceives itself and how the world perceives it?
Well, it's according to where you are. If I'm not, and I hate using these kind of terminology. I think the, I think, I think on the conservative side of the hyper conservative side, they believe that they are. It's almost like a replacement theology for America,
Okay.
right? Being Israel in a sense. We're the chosen people to change the world because we have all of the right things lined up in place, right? You have the other side that says, man, we care the most about people more than anyone to the point we're willing to adjust the Bible to love you. That's how much
Mm.
we love you. So I think that when you look at all of those different faiths, then you got this whole supernatural Christianity that's like over spiritualizes everything, false predictions. Like I know you heard about the whole thing about the guy saying it's supposed to be a rapture today in Wisconsin and
Hmm.
all and all the things. Thank you, son. And so and so with all of that in mind, it's kind of like, dude, like what is going on? So I think that there's a lot of confusion, but then one of the things that I do see, and I think that's on deck is there's a remnant of people who see all of that
Okay.
and says, I'm not any of that. I don't fit into these different categories. But I do see biblically what I'm supposed to be, and I want to pursue that. And so for me, I believe that that's what's needed in this season. We
Is this
need those dissonance, like Scott McKnight says, that see things differently. And I think those who rebrand the church that remnant of people that says we have to work on what it means to take our witness as believers to the world more seriously.
I imagine this book is coming out of like before it was a book idea, it was you just trying to do this, implement this in your own congregation.
Yeah, I did it as a sermon series,
Okay.
and I didn't just transcribe it into a book, but and so as people are like, Pastor, the church. This was 3 years ago, maybe. I did it's either 2 or 3 years ago. I did the blah, 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 I did the deal
Okay.
basically.
Sermon series.
I did a sermon series,
Okay.
and people were like, this really needs to be a book because this is a global word that we feel like the church needs to be able to lock and load into taking their faith seriously. And so that's when I ended up thinking through it and ended up writing on it and even expanding the series a little bit, quite a bit in the book. And that's how that came about. And so I'm hoping that it'll be a big help to folks.
So with your own church, how did, practically, how did the process of rebranding begin? How did you try and initiate that, lead people through that without drifting into marketing gimmicks and
Yeah, good question.
stuff?
Our church, we lost 75% of our church after the pandemic or
Okay.
during the pandemic. Then it regrew, and now we're a whole new church, and it's nothing but Gen Z and millennials. It's unreal. I mean, we already have millennials, but before the pandemic, it was 90% singles. Now it's 57% families.
Okay.
So really, it's more like we've led a lot of people to Jesus, baptized a lot of people, but we also have a lot of de-churched people
Okay.
who feel like they're on their last leg when it comes to church. And so they've been re-churched here. So now we feel like we have a blank slate. So now, to be honest, I have such a new church that a lot of them wasn't even here. Half of the people weren't here when I did the Rebranding the Church series.
Okay.
So, so basically, I'm going to have to do in our small groups, I'm going to have them go through the book,
Oh,
and
sweet. Okay.
so because it's just because one of the things that I wanted this book to be is I wanted us as believers to own what it means to be a part of helping the church be the church,
Hmm.
owning it, not like fanning it off to somebody else, but owning it. I think that's so important.
You already mentioned discipleship. How does discipleship tie into reshaping the church's reputation?
Because it's fundamental. Basically, our function is a two-sided coin. It's mission and discipleship. Mission is the act of going out to engage people in a contextualized way to communicate truth to them, to bring them to Jesus. Discipleship is the process of being organically and organized in gospel community in order that you may grow from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity. And so when we look at rebranding the church, I just don't think, I think people come to church, they say, hey, I like the preaching, I like the singing, I like the children's ministry, but nobody's like, how can I be the church? How can I had new members class the other day and I taught the last session on vision. And what's interesting is people asking all kinds, what do y'all do for this? And what do y'all do for people who deal with this? And what do y'all have it in? One lady said, what is the top three places where the church needs help in serving? And I was like, a different way of looking at it. That's a different way of looking at it because now we're not talking about consumerism.
Hmm.
We're talking about how do I put my hands to the plow? And so that blessed me because that means that person really understands what it means to reflect God's glory in a way that doesn't mean you don't get needs met. That's why they're one
Hmm.
another's and all the things, right? However, there should be a forward-thinking mindset in all of us that all of us think of ourselves as God's staff. You know what I'm saying? Not just his family, but his staff. And
Yeah.
so I have a part on God's team to work, and I don't know if we've ever really had that in the last generation or two.
Again, I think I'm repeating myself a little, but just as I hear you talk, it's like we're not just rebranding for people out there. We're like rebranding for
Absolutely.
other people in the pews and stuff. Like
Absolutely.
we need to
Absolutely.
see church differently.
Yeah, we do because we need to, because I think that there are a lot of people that have valid issues with the church who are Christian,
Hmm.
who have backed away for good reasons. Because it's and I'm pretty sure you've been in church, Ryley, long enough to know that there has been, my wife. I'm sorry, my wife just
No,
texted
all good, all good.
me. I need some short ribs. Short ribs. Well, I'll pick that up. I'll pick that up. All right. And so, ask that question again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to kind of observing, just in hearing you talk, being like, we're not just rebranding for the people outside the church and how they view us,
That's what it is. That's what I
rebranding
was. Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
those around us and for
Yes,
ourselves.
that's good. So I just believe that um we have to see ourselves honestly by being honest with where the church has failed.
Hmm.
where the church has gaps, where the church has brokenness. But then now let's, like, people think it's somebody else's responsibility to be an agent of change. But we as the church, we got to be responsible with that and saying leadership has to lead with something has to change, right? And we're open to having a environment of feedback that's only healthy feedback and gracious feedback and hopeful feedback,
Mhm.
right? That we all want to get on the same page so that we can be a part of God's team and functionally changing depending on from what it's been to where it needs to be.
I think you've highlighted this category of people already, and you said your own church is ministers to a lot of these kind of de-churched. What do you say to Christians who feel discouraged about the church's reputation and are tempted to walk away from it?
I empathize with it,
Okay.
first off, because I think it's fair.
Okay.
I think it's fair. And however, I just say, you know, um, if I have a bad experience with a doctor, I don't stop going to hospitals. I just change hospitals or
Hmm.
doctors. And so I believe that the church is the only thing that people have a bad experience with and permanently walk out on. And I don't think people realize how much a part of our lives is wrapped up in being in a local community that helps shape us and we help shape it. And learning how to endure, like the average, like I'm hearing now that the average person only lasts at a church 3 years now. That's what I just think. I'm trying to find out where I heard that. Don't quote me on that.
Sure,
But I
sure.
was like, the younger generation, they don't stay at a church more than 3 years. When they feel like they've gotten, see, the kids, I've gotten what I need. Now I'm moving on to
Is
where I can get something else.
is it 3 years that and move into another church or
Yeah, yeah,
pulling out
yeah,
of
yeah,
church?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
just a
Moving to
different
another,
church.
yeah, yeah. And so I was just like, I was rocked because I was just like, I see that because
Yep.
our church has probably been through 3 to 5,000 people over the last 20 years
Okay.
from a transiency standpoint. Easy. But I think it's getting, but some of that's because we had college students back in the day. But other of it is, people not willing to endure through hard seasons. It's just interesting, man. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean rural British Columbia. So I just in a lot of ways a different context, but people seem to be the same. There's not a ton of church options in our town,
Really.
evangelical wise.
Wow.
Because we're a town of like I think 14,000 surrounding area. So
Hmm.
say there's 12 churches, but you know half of those are kind of high church like Anglican United, whatever. So when you come
Hmm.
down to just kind of mainline evangelical churches, you have 4 or 5, and people, they're all there's a Pentecostal church, a Mennonite church, a Baptist church, and people just like you're saying, just move to one to the other because they're like, I'm gonna go here, get some worship, get filled up, like some
Hmm.
real charismatic worship. 3 years later, I'm gonna go here because they're really preaching the Bible just straight,
Yeah.
simply. Like I need that. Like, yeah, it's a funny thing, and it doesn't matter the age. I find like it's the older people, it's the
Yeah.
younger people, it's just I don't know if lack of commitment. And at least around here too, I noticed that I can't preach sermon series anymore, and like expect that most people heard last week's sermon and we're going to build on it.
Absolutely. That's
Feel like
crazy.
when I was growing up
That's
listening to
true.
pastors that it was
That's
more
true.
like you could just be building something
Hmm.
week after
That's
week.
true.
But
That's true. Wow. That's yeah, 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 yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you avoid the risk of making the church look more like the world than like Christ? I mean, maybe that's a silly question, but just the in the language of rebranding, uh, I don't know. I just
Yeah,
stuck
that's
with that.
easy. That's easy.
Okay.
Just defining it. Just
Okay.
defining what that looks like. That's why I had those different areas. It's saying, we're not trying to recreate it. We're not doing damage control and image consultation, in the sense of, how can we have a better image so that
Yeah.
people will like our product kind of thing. Whereas this is more like going back to what we're supposed to be versus I feel like we're worldly now. I
Could
feel
you
like
could you almost
I
call it
feel like I feel like we're
unbranding?
worldly now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
Could you
like we're
call it
worldly now.
Could you almost call it unbranding?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's just crazy.
Like,
Yeah.
is that almost like rebranding is a catchy title, but it's almost like we're trying to lose the brand
Yeah,
that we've created?
we're trying to the brand that we become. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because the church has the best product and the worst customer service.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna name the spot, but it was a good soul food restaurant here in Philly. I mean the best fried chicken hands down I ever had in my life. Mac and cheese, greens, off the map, cornbread, man, but their customer service was terrible in the sense of not the people's attitude, but more so how long it took to get your food without, and there was no communication, like what's going on. You get your food like 45 minutes, 50 minutes later. And and one of the best, it used to stay crowded. They closed down. They closed down. And so you can have a best product, but the worst customer service.
Hmm.
And that's what the church has. And people are not going to put up with bad experiences to get a good product. They're just not.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is that
The bad experience actually colors how you value the product.
it's a whole church thing, but is this starting with leadership?
Yes. It has to start with leadership because leadership are the cultural creators, members are the cultural responders to create. As you make disciples, listen, Jesus gave the disciples what the culture was going to be like for them. When I leave, they're going to hate you worse than me. They're going to deliver you up to. He gave them the culture, but he said this is what you're supposed to be like. He gave the parable of the soils. He gives the parable of the servant. Like when he said the kingdom of heaven is like. Jesus is using similes and metaphors to describe a culture of what the kingdom of God is like when you walk with Him. And I don't think we're transmitting that. We're not. We think when we think of Jude 3, we think of apologetics, but
Hmm.
Jude 3 is more about culture creating than it is apologetics. Apologetics is the result of that, but contending for the faith is really just making sure you give the right one out. That's really what it means. And so I don't think we have a unified understanding of what handing the faith content wise is and how to functionally work on what it means as a universal church and making sure that faith is properly handed down to those who we invest in.
If you're not a pastor, it starts there, but then how do you, as everyday Christians, sit in the pew, how do you take ownership of the church's reputation in your own neighborhoods, workplaces, these things?
Yeah, if you're in a healthy church, what's important with that is I take a meeting with anybody in my church and I listen to them and hear from them. And I think one of the things that people need to do, one of the things that always bothered me as a pastor, is I've had people like that I had a relationship with out of nowhere send me a I'm leaving letter, didn't even talk to me,
Okay.
and then I found out from somebody else that maybe they had issues or whatever. But I'm like, you never brought that up. Like
Hmm.
that's so irresponsible. And so I'm like, because what you saw that we didn't have probably could have helped sanctify the church community if you would have been bold enough in the gospel, because you're unbiblically telling the church what it isn't biblically doing in an unbiblical way. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And so I want people to see it that way. And I think that giving the church a chance to change, particularly when you're in a place of you're able to give feedback, I just believe that we have to do a better job of leaders have to have an open door policy on constructive criticism, and believers have to know how to give criticism in a way that is honoring, yet full of love and truth.
Hmm. Was your that little analogy or story you're kind of saying to some degree, like people are complaining that like, hey, your church has no thumbs, but it's like, you're the thumb.
Right,
You can't
right,
be that here.
right,
Complaining
right,
about something that like maybe the Lord has sovereignly ordained like you to bring here, like
right.
giving you the, is that, yeah,
Yes,
something
absolutely.
there?
I think people have to see themselves as indispensable. They have to. Yep. People really, really have to.
Well, what's one mistake that you think churches make when starting on this journey, when trying to improve their image, that maybe at times makes things worse?
Overpromising and under delivering.
Okay, sweet.
You know, when you overpromise, like one of the things I used to laugh at when we were planting churches is I would look at the guy's brochure and I said, man, this brochure make you seem like you're a well-oiled machine the way this thing is laid out. I said, but bro, it's a little more rough in there like that. And I said, this is false advertising. You need to match, you need to tell people what type of journey this is going to be. You can't, what you described on that brochure is a perfect
Mhm.
journey and a perfect experience. When I'm telling you, it's far from that, you know? And so that doesn't mean you say, oh, we have a lot of sexual immorality in our church and a lot of,
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and a lot of weed smokers. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you got to use language like we're a community, we're messy people trying to help one another clean up. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
just saying that, right?
Yeah.
In other words, so a person not coming in there expecting, oh man, you know, this is going to be perfect, and it's not. That's what makes because unity has to have conflict for the unity to matter.
Hmm.
And so um I think that that's what the day of Pentecost was about God restoring unity by uniting people to one another. And
How,
so through
how
the
does
Holy
that happen at
Spirit.
your church? How do you, I don't know, show the humanity of your congregation?
Yeah,
Like,
so
is it
I'm transparent from the pulpit.
okay?
Um, we have a very transparent culture here when it comes to that type of thing. And one of the things we talk about is how do you bear with the church? You, like God bears with you. How do you bear with people? Because we have a no nonsense kind of generation that we're passing where you person have one conflict and they leave and they don't even deal with the conflict. And so we've taken people through in our deal here in our Bible study time, we've gone through things like peacemakers and talking about how to peacemake because we're assuming that there are going to be problems, and so you have to go through have a healthy understanding of peacemaking and going through a healthy peacemaking process. And so we have smaller groups that we utilize that are called huddles that people get in that is more accountability driven through encouragement and challenge. And so, because as the church grows, you want it to get smaller, and so we have a multifaceted amount of ways where we build an environment where it's okay to be broken, but it's not okay to want to remain the same.
Do you think in some ways that churches that are maybe more like majority African American, like has the African American community done better at transparency in the church
Yeah, because
or
I
some
think,
others? Just like I'm
yeah,
thinking, like even just in preaching, like even just the feedback that you get live as you're, I don't just
yeah,
more.
good question. I think predominantly African American churches for them that aren't legalistic, most of them are an environment of grace,
Okay.
you know. And so it assumes and gives room for anyone having issues. And so I think that that's the big issue that I think is good for the church, but I think that we have to be careful of swinging the pendulum all the way over where we let leaven a little bit of leaven the whole lump. So
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
If the church succeeds in rebranding itself faithfully, what do you hope its witness will look like in 10 and 20 years?
Oh, I just hope that we're who people can come to for advice.
Okay.
Leaders can come to for prayer and wisdom, and that because back in the day the church used to be the center of the African American community, but now not as much. And so the goal that because if you had an issue, the first place you would come is the church. I hope that the church will re-earn the credibility to have a great amount of common ground with the people that we are called to missionally engage where we live and dwell, so that the common ground is so normal, it creates a disposition of respect that is demanded just because the character has overshadowed the past actions.
I mean, we're always hopeful because ultimately, this is Jesus' church. He's the head. Like it's going to succeed. But as you just look at people that make up the church right now, do you feel hopeful?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I
Okay.
feel hopeful because I see a remnant.
Okay.
That's the thing. I see people are seeing through the mess, and they're able to see what is needed for truth to prevail.
If you had one message, my last question for you, if you want one message to give to skeptical non-Christians about what the church really is, and maybe right now, again, this cultural moment, maybe there's a lot more asking that right now. What would you say the church is?
The church is Jesus Christ on earth, in a sense.
Amen.
And the only issue is Jesus is fully perfect. We're not. However, our desire is that we would be who Jesus wanted us to be. For Jesus down the cross, he didn't come to save our souls. He even came to save our humanity. And I pray that in your sphere, that God would bless the Christians around you to be some of the best human beings that you've ever experienced. And that be the first bridge to you hearing more about Jesus.
Awesome. Eric, the book again, rebranding the church, restoring the image of God's
Yes.
people in the world,
Yes.
and it's next Wednesday. But what is the exact date? Do you
That's
know?
it. September 30th.
September 30th. Okay, comes out September 30th. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Eric. The book's been a gift to me, and this conversation has been a highlight, man. Thank you so much for making time.
Oh, Riley, thank you. Thank you so much, man.